Hello and welcome to the SportsPro Podcast. On this episode, fresh from his holiday in Switzerland, Josh is back to his tax-free antics with a trip to Monaco for the Sportel Business Conference. We'll hear what he got up to there. The closest Steve is going to be getting to Monaco is facing them on the next Football Manager. Sports Interactive's latest edition in the iconic series is back after 2 years, and he spoke to studio director Miles Jacobson about the new release. One of the worst kept secrets in sports broadcasting is out, so we'll spend a bit of time dissecting Formula One's deal with Apple. There's also the quiz no one asked for, a look ahead to this month's SportsPro Media Summit, and that's the SportsPro Podcast, the show breaking down the stories shaping sport. I've already teed them up, but here again is SportsPro reporter Josh Sim. Hello, Josh.
Hello, Ed.
SportsPro editor Steve McCaskill. Hello, Steve.
Hello, Ed.
And not forgetting SportsPro head of editorial Sam Carp. Hello, Sam.
Hello, Ed. I feel like the odd one out here. I'm the only one who hasn't done anything interesting in the last few weeks, by the sounds of it.
Oh, no, I haven't done anything interesting at all, so you're in good company there. Yeah, no, Josh's been to Monaco. Steve's been hobnobbing with gaming royalty. You've been stuck at SportsPro Towers reading my mediocre copy.
It's been a joy, mate. That's why we've been separated onto this sofa, and Josh and Steve have been on that one, because the camera's going to be on them for the most of the time in this episode, isn't it?
Sounds good to me, yeah. Josh, we've got a clip of you summarising your time at Sportel, but how was it in Monaco? Surely Monaco isn't a shithole as described by multiple Olympic cycling gold medalist, so Bradley Wiggins. That's a hell of a question to start with.
No, I don't want to speak on Bradley Wiggins' experience in Monaco, but no, it was the first time there. It was really interesting to go over there, and I've never been sort of seen a place like it in terms of just how people in Monaco live and stuff, and yeah, and then suddenly it's taken over by suited and men and women in briefcases, all heading towards the Grimaldi Forum, all working for some sort of sports entity or agency or tech provider, looking to do deals. So yeah, it was very busy, and yeah, it was a very cool, interesting insight into sort of that part of the world, because I feel like we report a lot on like these broadcast deals. It's nice to sort of get some sort of insights to how they're done, or where sort of the origins of these deals sort of start from, I guess.
And you snapped Steve's streak as well. How many Sportels in a row had you been to before this year?
Well, it wasn't that long. It was 3, enough to get a season ticket at the Irish pub, which I have learned since is where Glenn Hoddle used to go after training, which irritated Arsene Wenger. But yeah, that's my takeaway.
Well, from Josh to Josh, let's hear from you in Monaco.
Hello, I'm Josh Sim, and I am representing SportsPro at the Sportel Business Conference in Monaco. I'm actually stood just above the Lavrotto Beach, which is a short distance from the Grimaldi Forum, which you can see behind me, which is where the main conference is taking place. Let's talk about Sportel. For those who don't know, it's an annual sports business conference where the biggest sports properties, leagues, broadcasters and agencies and tech providers, they all descend in Monaco and quite literally set out their stall in terms of what they are going to offer each other. Predominantly in terms of broadcast arrangements, you'll see a lot of broadcast deals agreed in Monaco over the 3 days of the conference. There is also a speaker lineup with some panels talking about sort of the big challenges that the sports industry faces. This is my first time in Monaco and at Sportel conference, and here's a couple of the things that I've picked out as things you will definitely see. You'll definitely see a lot of people like me with their Sportel pass, and predominantly a phone as well. They try and locate the person that they've maybe met over email but haven't seen face to face. You'll see tables full of people sort of getting through meeting after meeting, pretty much like a speed dating round. And you'll know how the meeting's gone if it ends in a handshake, which seems to signal that a deal's being done, if there's maybe a hug of some sort, or maybe the words, we'll talk about this later, or let's talk about this soon. So that seems to be the common parlance lexicon that I seem to be hearing as I sort of meander my way through the conference. In terms of visuals, like all the properties and big broadcasters have brought out major stalls showing off their leagues and showing off their sporting action. It's really a showroom of sports and broadcasting, and yeah, a great way, if anyone's new to the industry, to sort of really get a taster of what it's like and how and what all these properties are doing and what they're looking for from a broadcast standpoint and what their product looks like and can offer. I've been meeting up with the likes of the FIS, the International Ski and Snowboard Federation, with Kings League, with their chief executive, with IMG, one of the big agency giants in the sports world, and I've also met up with Chief Executive Officer Danny Townsend as well. So you can tell that there's a really wide variety of people that attend this conference, and that's because of the needs it has and the amount of things there are to offer for a variety of stakeholders at the conference. We've had an interesting speaker roster as well. I've heard from panels that have featured the likes of Danny Townsend and John Martin, the PFL Chief Executive. Really interesting speaker lineup. I know that Javier Tebas is going to close the conference later with an address, the LaLiga president, so should be interesting to hear what he has to say about sports and media and what his outlook is on the industry going forward. So yeah, it's been a really interesting time at Sportel. It's been great to have the opportunity to come, and it's great that SportsPro are able to be here and to report on what's happening, and to get the goss and to find out all the things that are going to be coming out in the next coming days. So stay tuned on the tuned in on the website to check out all the latest written content that's to come. But for now, back to you guys in the studio.
Cheers, Josh. Back to you, Josh. You heard from a couple of big names there, including LaLiga President Javier Tebas and SURJ Sports Investment CEO Danny Townsend. What did Senor Tebas have to say?
Senor Tebas is a regular, I think, on the Sportel circuit. And if you've followed his words closely, you know he has a very strong anti-piracy agenda, which he began with. But I think the most interesting thing to come away from his address and what ended up writing for on the website was his view on pan-European deals, which we've seen UEFA starting to sort of enter that space. They did it with the Women's Champions League with Disney Plus. They're now open to that possibility for the Men's Champions League. And so, yeah, his comments on whether I guess domestic leagues could follow, and his view that they're unlikely to sort of gain as much success from those deals as maybe UEFA are trying to accomplish is kind of interesting and maybe an insight as to maybe the challenge that those leagues sort of face, these domestic leagues, in terms of trying to find these moments outside of, say, an El Clasico sort of mean something for a streamer to say, hey, we want to take on those rights. And I guess, yeah, his preference for market-by-market deals seems to indicate that, that's what they seems to be the best approach in terms of their rights outside of Spain.
I think it was a really interesting time for that session because I think, wasn't it the evening after Tebas had spoken on stage that they cancelled or were forced to cancel their the overseas game they had planned in Miami, and kind of the comments that Tebas came out with after that was sort of alluding to the dominance of the Premier League, and kind of that was part of the motivation for them going over there to try and grow their audience. And I think also some of the comments that he made at Sportel there just kind of add to that, and maybe sort of the apprehension that Tebas might have at the moment. I imagine also Relevant Football Partners were probably one of the deal makers you saw stalking the floor at Sportel. I imagine they were quite busy given that Champions League tender that you just mentioned. But I think it's interesting for a league like LaLiga at the moment. You have obviously the Champions League trying to sort of attract these global streamers with this new package. Whether or not they're successful, that we'll see. And then also, obviously, the Premier League continues to grow its international media rights. That's increasingly a challenge for LaLiga. So where does that kind of leave them? If you do have sort of these broadcasters like prioritising the Premier League, prioritising the Champions League, perhaps even almost domestically as well, they're not seeing much growth.
Yeah,
a lot of them. So yeah, kind of interesting timing for all that, I think, for that particular session.
Yeah, and you can see it with what they're doing in the UK market in terms of splitting up a game, giving a game to Disney Plus and giving majority of games to Premier Sports indicates that they're trying to be more flexible and not sort of give up all their rights to sort of one broadcaster in one market. They're sort of looking at ways in which they can split that up and reach different audiences. So it'll be interesting to see, and we're seeing other leagues do it as well. But yeah, Steve, I don't know if you thought that this is a trend that other leagues are going to have to pursue as they sort of, look for ways to stay in front of the curve, I guess.
Yeah, I think the Liga has been, over the years, been quite innovative, or at least tried new things in how it does market its rights abroad, not always to great success. I mean, if we look at the UK market, which is close to home, had a long association with Sky Sports and then decided to go with 11 Sports, and that just didn't work out at all. It's retreated, not retreat, that's the wrong word, I suppose, but it's gone with Premier Sports. That seems to be working out for it to a degree. It's got the LaLiga TV, it's got the deal with Disney Plus, and it's got digital highlights and clips deals with DAZN globally and Sky Sports in the UK. So it's trying lots of different things. The challenge for the Liga is always going to be that it's got two teams that are just so much bigger than everyone else. It's a struggle to create narratives and promote other teams as well as part of a single package. I mean, the Premier League has this to a degree as well with the so-called Big Six. So I think that's just, it feels like it has to do something different. As Sam says, it's been trying to do things for years to narrow that financial gap, narrow the gap on which is increasingly apparent on the pitch as well. If you look at Champions League results this week with or the week, recent ones where 5 or 6 English teams are winning in that competition. So it's got to try new things. It's he's very competitive, is Senor Tebas, and he's just doing what he thinks is the best route forward for La Liga.
I'm sure he's taking great comfort in the fact that La Liga has more athletes in SportsPro's 50 most marketable athletes list for 2025 than any other league. So that might be something.
I mean, one year at Sportel, he literally had a screen grab of a SportsPro article, so he probably is watching, yes.
Senor Tebas, you're very welcome on the podcast. Let's move on to Danny Townsend and SURJ. I mean, he's been doing the rounds this year. We heard from him at SportsPro Live. We've spoken to him several times since he was appointed. He's probably sick of the sight of us, but what did you glean from his session, Josh?
His session was about, it was funny, the composition of it, because he was sat with the PFL Chief Executive John Martin and Kings League Chief Executive Yamel Agagawa. It's my first pronunciation, attempt at that pronunciation. But both of them are leagues that SURJ has put an investment in.
The odds. What are the odds? How did they arrange it?
No, I know. It was hard orchestrated. But it was interesting in terms of those two properties talking about sort of how the investment has helped their operations. Obviously, there's a strong focus on setting up MENA or regional specific league when it comes to the Kings League, and PFL, obviously PFL MENA as well. And so, yeah, talking about what Danny Townsend specifically, talking about sort of the need for when they look at properties in terms of ones that are innovating and that are happy to experiment with format, those are sort of the ones that they're sort of looking at. And you can see we haven't mentioned PTO that they've invested in as well, but they've also been willing to do that as well with triathlon. So yeah, it was interesting of him to be there. I spoke to him sort of away from the panel as well about their investment in DAZN, and what their plans are for the DAZN MENA, which is the joint venture that they've set up, and how they're sort of working with DAZN, but also working with those properties they've invested in and want to maximize those revenues, which may not necessarily mean a broadcast deal on DAZN. So they sort of have many hands in sort of different organizations essentially, but trying to lift all of them up if that's possible in a way.
Yeah, I think if you look at the relationship between DAZN and properties that SURJ and PIF have invested in, it tends to be more global in terms of providing that global platform for those properties. If you look at Live Golf, for example, there's also a strong partnership with Saudi Pro League outside of Saudi Arabia as well. I think the one thing that I took from one thing is worth reiterating from your story, Josh, was that in most cases, SURJ is taking minority investment in these companies, so it can't influence their media rights strategy to such a degree that DAZN is prioritized. But if you look at the first DAZN MENA specific deal they've signed is with the Saudi Jockey Club, so that could be perhaps provide a greater indication of what they're planning to do with that joint venture.
Sam, anything to add?
Not really. I think just that the sort of approach that they're taking makes sense. Like if you've got a stake in something, you want it to be generating as much money as possible, so that the value of your investment goes up. And as Steve mentioned, that deal they've done with the Saudi Jockey Club also kind of ties in, I suppose, with the remit that they have at SURJ, which is to kind of elevate the visibility of sport in Saudi Arabia specifically. So I think we'll probably sort of see more deals along those lines, as well as kind of perhaps sort of maybe doing some deals with some of those properties that they've invested in. But I think with some of those properties that DAZN already has a bit of a relationship with some of them as well. Correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah, so maybe that's what we'll see.
Well, we'll leave it there for Sportel for this year. Thanks again for having us. Steve, I know you've been waiting patiently to tell us about your big day out, and to be totally transparent, I have as well. We're both massive Football Manager fans. We like listing our favourite wonder kids, having spent more than 20 years playing the game, which definitely isn't sad and does sound a bit weird out of context, just blurting out names at each other. But as I said in the intro, you went off to speak to Sports Interactive Studio Director Miles Jacobson, and we've got a clip of that. What did you talk about?
We talked about many things. We talked about the growing role of, I guess, Football Manager within the real life football ecosystem, how it's grown over the years, in terms of its influence. So, there's lots of scouting tools that are actually based on Football Manager's UI. The data is used by real world football clubs. And then we talked about the role of the game as a form of fan engagement, as it's developed over the years. Talked about inclusion of women's football, which is one of the most noteworthy inclusions of this, which is the biggest leap forward in a generation. So that's what we talked about. And also we talked about the delay. We couldn't really skirt around that. So yeah, we talked about many things, and it was a wonderful day out, as you've alluded to.
Well, let's hear a clip from your chat with Miles now.
What was the thinking behind adding the world of women's football to the game? Was it because you saw a commercial opportunity, or because it was something you thought would add to the game, or something you just felt was the right thing to do? Why did you do it, and what was the scale of adding that to the game?
So I was speaking at a conference where I sat there and said that it wasn't commercially viable. And when I came off stage at that conference, 3 of the Lionesses came up to me, sat me down and said, it's never going to be commercially viable unless people like you actually help us push through the glass ceiling. And they were absolutely spot on. So we started working on it, or came up with plans to work on it, and ran some numbers. And at that point, the numbers still didn't make sense, but they make more sense now that we're actually delivering it a few years down the line. So I think the reasons that we added it are, one, it's football, and we have lots of leagues inside our game that aren't commercially viable when you look at them in that raw format, but the game is the sum of all of its parts. So we looked at how women's football was growing. From our perspective, it's definitely become a lot stronger commercially now than it was back then. I think there's still a lot of room for growth, in the same way as there's a lot of room for growth for many of the other leagues that are inside the game. But for us, it's really about consumer choice. Our games are played for hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of hours on average by people, and everyone always wants more to do. So we've added more men's leagues this year. We've also added 11 countries' leagues on the women's side of things, most of which are licensed, so that we can be part of the solution rather than part of the problem, and also give all of our players more choice when they are playing the game, and hopefully be part of the journey and accelerate the journey for women's football to be even more and more popular. I mean, on the international stage, it's popular as the men's game in a lot of ways in a lot of countries. League-wise, there's still a way to go, but I think we'll get there.
And do you think having women's football in Football Manager can have that impact on the women's game in terms of how people talk about it and understand it more, because they might be playing managing a women's team and understanding more about the players, studying more about the various transfer regulations or competition structures? Is that something you think could happen?
I'm told by women's footballers and people who work in women's football that is the effect that it's going to have, and I hope that they are right. It kind of freaks me out a bit, the effect that the game has had on the football world, right? When Ov and Paul Collier first started working on this game in their bedroom in Shropshire, they weren't expecting it was still going to be going, didn't think that we would grow to the size that we have. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm a short bloke from Watford who makes a game for himself, and it just so happens there's a few million people who like it out there, and football clubs have started using it. It's massive props to all of our researchers around the world, our research team here, the business development team who works so closely with clubs, but there are now, with some cases it's men's and women's side, but there's 40 clubs now who license our database from us to be part of their scouting network, which is one of those life imitating art things ad infinitum. So I know that you've played the game for a long time, right? So we have a meeting room here that I call the data errors room, but everyone else calls the legends room, which is the players that we got wrong over the years. If we can make anyone or help anyone become a household name off the back of the game, then we're winning, really, with what we're doing. So whether that be a male player or a female player, as long as we're getting it right.
Yeah, there's a rich cultural tapestry of players who are fantastic in game and haven't quite lived up to the superstar status they have digitally.
Not for a while.
Not for a while.
So we have a lot more checks and balances in place now, and our strike rate's a lot higher. But I also want to say on that last question, and I'm being asked about women's football a lot, and that's great. But it's just football. For us, this is about expanding our football universe. It's not really about making a statement. It's not about doing something that deserves a pat on the back, because it's quite the opposite, right? We were part of the problem. We were too late to the party on this. So it's great that we're doing it now, but inside the studio, it's one game, it's one sport, it's football.
And if you want to listen to the rest of that interview, you can do that on our digital platforms, including YouTube, which I would really recommend. As much as we love Football Manager, Steve, be fair to say, there are plenty of other sports games out there. Why is this latest release worth talking about, other than for my enjoyment, obviously?
It's, as I said before, it's probably the biggest leap forward in the series history. And previous editions have been iterative. I guess say for the last 20 years since it became Football Manager. It used to be Championship Manager, and you've seen new leagues added, you've seen a couple of new features, and it's been almost like just an ongoing roadmap. Whereas there's a recognition at the studio that it needed to perhaps move to more modern technology, so a new game engine. It also had things they wanted to do that it couldn't really do with what it was doing before, or at least do so quickly. So it made that decision to move to a new engine, and last year's game was cancelled because it wasn't in a what they called it, a state they'd want to release it in. And of course that was unprecedented, both from in terms of how it's come out every year basically, and that was obviously affected fans. It affected Sega, its owner as a business. Just lost revenue, but they felt it was important to get it right. And one of the reasons that it doesn't feel like it needed to make that shift is because video games are a source of engagement. They attract a different kind of audience to broadcast, to other ways that fans interact with football. And then we've had the addition of women's football, and that was also a major undertaking. Partly because they need, it took years to assemble the database. Football Manager relies on that database to function. And I think, I can't remember, I was reading some other coverage this week, and it's easier to find out the name of Harry Kane's cat than it is to find out the height of Beth Mead, I think is one of the quotes that was doing the rounds. So they assembled this network of researchers and scouts to create it. There's also small things like the entire code is written on the assumption that everyone is men, or so everyone in the game is a man. So you have to change thousands, if not more, of bits of text and phrasing to reflect that. And then there's things like animations and how the game plays out in the game engine. So that was that's been a huge step forward for the game. It's going to make more people interact with women's football. It's going to have a knock-on effect on the real world. If you think about data collection and how those tools are used this week, at the time of launch, they just agreed to deal with Angel City from NWSL, and they're going to be using the data in recruitment and coaching. So it's just a huge step forward in terms of, from a technical point of view, in terms of how it covers the world of football.
I haven't played it yet, Sam. I'm very willing to play it on company time, for research. For research purposes. Well, there we go.
You'll see the consequences. Yeah. But no, I think I was just going to say, I think I listened to Steve's interview this morning on my train into work. Very very dulcet tones, Steve. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Even better in audio form. But
Thanks for radio.
Very much so.
a few things that like came away from it. Like, I quite enjoyed how candid Miles was about like that process of delaying the game and the difficult conversations they had to have with partners. Obviously, their owner, and then also kind of the various leagues that are part of the game, and then also sort of the gaming companies that distribute the game also, and kind of the conversations that they will have had there. And I know you didn't go into it, but it'd be really interesting to know kind of the financial impact of that. I guess, what is a year without a game, especially where they're investing so heavily in the development that they've done. And then also the other thing I think from the clip that we've just seen is the fact that he actually had lionesses coming up to him. I don't know if he named who those lionesses were, but maybe off camera perhaps. But I thought that was a nice little anecdote. And then I think the other thing that you've also just touched on in that clip that's going to be really interesting to see is if it's basically essentially whether Football Manager has the same impact on the women's game as we've seen it having on the men's over the past sort of 20, 30 years from a fandom perspective. I don't play it anymore, just don't have the time. But I know lots of people who are...
You make time for things that matter, right, Steve?
Who still do, and kind of... But you can still sort of participate in that discourse around it and the cult heroes that it's created over time. And I guess also just the influence that it's had on the way that people engage with football and talk about football, in terms of the engagement with the tactical side of the game that I think's really evolved over the past 20 years. And Football Manager's probably had a real impact in that. And so it'll be interesting now with the women's game in there, whether it sort of, essentially, develops and evolves the fandom in that way, in the same way that it has done on the men's side. So then that's going to be kind of interesting to watch over the next couple of years.
Yeah, like any good sport or any popular sports entertainment product, it helps frame the conversation for the sport it's in. Before we move on, it would be incredibly self-indulgent of me to ask some Football Manager quiz questions. So here are some Football Manager quiz questions. Question 1, fastest finger first or whatever, whoever buzzes in first. Question 1, tipped to be the next Pele. Who was the standout American wonder kid on the first Football Manager released in 2005? I think you put your hand up first.
Oh, is that
we'll take back on the tape.
Oh, God, Sam, you can go for it.
Freddie Adu.
Correct. Question 2, I'd be amazed if any of you got this, but why not? Which English rapper, singer and songwriter said this? I was addicted to Championship Manager like it was cocaine.
Worried about saying something libelous here. So
He has a this person has a plan, but it's not plan A.
Oh, it was a plan B.
Correct.
I mean, that spoon-fed to me, wasn't it?
Question 3, how many divorce cases have there been in which the game has been cited as a factor?
3?
Oh, wait, is it number percentage? Would be
Number.
I mean, this is outdated.
This is from a book I got given in 2012, so it's probably gone up by then.
is it global? It's a global stat.
Yeah.
since the game's been made.
Since the game has been released, how many divorce cases have there been in which the game has been cited as a factor? And I really hope I'm not going to join that statistic.
The same. I have this book as well.
They're 1,500.
I'd lower it a lot. You've made the question look rubbish now. I thought that was quite a high number, that to have an actual game cited specifically.
Well, I'm still on 3. So Josh, if you get somewhere between 3 and 1,500, you might get the point.
Based on your response to Sam's answer, say 1,200.
Okay, Steve, remarkably, is the closest. It's 35.
Josh, you could have game the system. My goodness.
No, 3-5.
I don't know.
I just
We'll come back next year and it could be 37.
20 million people, 20 million people play this game.
Yeah, I thought like there'll be a high number of people who have I don't know, a lot of arguments caused by 4 a.m. like sneak outs to laptops and whatever.
Maybe people are suffering in silence. Who knows? Probably best we move on. I think. Let's move on to an absolute whopper of a broadcast agreement that soon became a question of when rather than if it would happen. It's F1's deal with Apple in the US, and it's times like this I really wish Cian Brittle was here to do the heavy.
What's going on?
Cian,
We're talking about F1 without me.
oh, who'd have thought it? Who'd have thought you'd be in a company building when we're doing a company recording? I just never saw that coming.
I just can't believe it didn't cross our minds to invite our Motorsport editor on. We're talking about probably the biggest broadcast deal in Motorsport this year.
Well, he's here.
Yeah, you might as well sit down. Come on.
Yeah, should I come in?
Come on, only keep. Come on.
Should I head out? Are we running this like the Red Bull team? Are we doing Sports Pro like Alex Albon not being sent to junior team?
Enjoy racing bulls.
That was seamless, I think.
Up in the big leagues.
That was definitely not rehearsed. Or it definitely wasn't. None of this is rehearsed.
Obviously
you can
not.
tell. Cian, thanks for joining us. How is everything in the world of Zoom?
In the world of Zoom Zooms, it's good, Ed. Good to be back on the podcast, very briefly. But yeah, all good in the world of motorsport as always.
Well, I hope you'd be here, and the motorsport gods have heard me. F1 Apple, it's a 5-year deal from 2026. It's reportedly worth $750 million. You've been speaking about it on the Mike's Out podcast with BlackBook's Tom Brown, the man who has the second best man bun in SportsPro. So let's jump to a quick clip there to get your immediate reaction to the deal.
Formula One has finally agreed its deal with Apple in the US. But Tom, this is obviously massive news in the US. We've been expecting it for some time. It's good to see that it's finally been confirmed. What do you think this means for Formula One's growth and also reach in the US?
So there's certainly a lot to dig into here and a few different things to look at. I think for me, the first kind of major initial reaction to it is how much of a step change this is in the US sports broadcasting industry as a whole. For Apple to take not just, media rights, but a major global rights holders' media rights is a huge step away from the traditional, sports broadcasters that we've seen up until now. For the likes of Fox, NBC, ESPN, etc. I think this represents a major shift for ultimately, a streaming service to take these rights for Formula One in the US is a major shift in the landscape, let's say, of, sports broadcasting in the US. I think at a very top level, that's my kind of initial reaction. Obviously, it's not come necessarily as a big surprise. It's been building over time, and I think particularly since the F1 movie, we've known that Apple have been a serious contender for these rights. But still, to see them move away from a more traditional broadcaster, I think represents a very interesting shift in the dynamic.
Well, it's an interesting shift in the dynamic because the ESPN partnership, which, obviously ESPN currently, the broadcasters, it's been going really well in recent years, and it's shown exponential growth. ESPN picked up Formula One in 2018 when F1 really wasn't that well watched in the States, and we've seen it go from strength to strength. This year, most races have averaged over 1 million viewers, which is really, really strong for F1 considering where they've come from in such a short space of time. Obviously, last weekend's race in Singapore maybe didn't get the best viewership. We will come on to that later. But overall, F1's been doing really well with ESPN. So to make this, substantially a big change going across to a streaming platform, I'm not quite sure how this is going to land initially. I think we'll see growth over the course of the multi-year deal. But I think that first year is going to be really interesting to see how those viewers translate across to a new platform, exclusively streaming. I know obviously F1 TV has existed in the US previously. I know part of this deal will see existing F1 TV subscribers transition to Apple subscribers. I believe Apple reportedly paying around $140 million for this new deal. I think it makes sense that they don't want competition with F1's OTT streaming platform. They want to be the exclusive home of Formula One in the US. That all makes sense, and why they're spending a substantial amount of money on Formula One, up from, I think, around $90 million that ESPN is currently paying. So we're going to see that transition and see, the F1 TV brand as a standalone thing, fade away in the US, but it will still exist within Apple. That functionality will still be there. It's not going anywhere. It's just all going to be housed on the Apple platform, which, that makes complete sense. And, we'll see that existing subscriber base continue to exist in the US. But we're not entirely sure what the viewership numbers of F1 TV are like in the US. Formula One doesn't make those figures public. We know that ESPN's getting around 1 million viewers per race. We don't know what it's like on F1 TV. They don't publicise that information, unfortunately. So I think what's going to be interesting is to see how that existing ESPN viewership base makes the transition across to Apple, and also how that existing F1 TV base makes the transition across, and how that combines together to give us a better picture of the US landscape at the moment. But I think nervous and excited is probably a good way to describe how I'm feeling about F1's move to Apple.
Steve, as we've said, it's a big deal. Why does this deal make sense for both parties?
I mean, I think it's a significant deal rather than a big deal if you look at finances. It works out $150 million per year, which is less than what Apple's paying for Major League Soccer.
I mean, it's an existentially big deal.
I know, it's a significant deal. But there is a point to why I'm raising these. You know, if you look at it, it's not a lot of money for Apple to get access to what is a growing sport, one that may have plateaued in the US, but one that has an affluent fan base that may want to subscribe to Apple TV. So for Apple, it's not a lot of money. There's a fair bit upside. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. So I think it just makes sense from there. And they can associate, there's this innovative technology company that can associate themselves with the most technologically advanced sport in the world. For F1, again, if you're looking at audience figures and potential growth, there are signs that, it may not be able to reach that many more people in the US, at least in the current trajectory. So why not cash in now? Why not go to a platform where, it could have some sort of prestige by being associated with Apple. It can use Apple's wider platform of devices and services to grow the sport among the fans that it already has. So I think it makes sense for both parties. I'm not saying the sport is not going to grow on Apple or anything of the sort. If you look at where both sides are, it makes sense.
Sorry to jump in. I have a question maybe for Steve or Cian. Who's this a better deal for? Because all I've sort of seen, a lot of the discourse around it on the back of it, is that it's as Steve just outlined why it's a good deal for Apple. From an F1 perspective, it's obviously good from a revenue side of things, but a lot of the discourse has kind of been around, they're hiding themselves behind a paywall on a platform that doesn't have as many subscribers as say Netflix or Amazon does, for example. ESPN, obviously the most dominant sports broadcaster in the US. Maybe I've answered my own question there, but
yeah, moving on.
What do you kind of in that sort of context? Who's this a better deal for?
Well, yeah, that was a great answer to your own question, Sam. But I think for me, it's going to be interesting to see how, I guess, wider reach and visibility is affected by moving behind the paywall on Apple. It was interesting that Steve said, did you say that F1's a plateauing sport in the US?
I think the rate of growth is slowing.
Okay.
They've had viewership perspective.
Cian triggered.
I've been triggered by that.
You do this every week. You do sort of do a viewership roundup every week, but it's not sort of like
13 of the 20 races this season have set event viewership records, which is a pretty good run for F1.
Many of them were marginal though.
Yeah,
but they're still records.
Yeah. But anyway, we won't go into the.
But I think it's still growing to a point, and I think it's just an interesting time with that positive momentum to then move away from ESPN and move to Apple. I think it's potentially going to have a short-term impact on overall viewership, but I think it'll be interesting as well with the F1 TV offering in the US, because that's going to stop existing as a standalone product. I think a lot of, avid Formula One fans would have used that over ESPN, but then you've also got the trade-off of, I believe the Apple annual subscription is cheaper than the F1 TV premium subscription. So you've got fans will actually be saving money out of this move because Formula One's being offered as part of the standard Apple subscription rather than something like the MLS, which is an additional cost on top of that.
Yeah, I think that if they have I'm obviously not privy to the conversations, but if they have kind of prioritised the revenue side of things, I'd be interested to know why. Because I think it's not like they're seeing quite a lot of revenue growth, or have done, especially on the sponsorship side. So it's not, and this isn't it's quite, what was ESPN's deal? It was what was it, 30?
It's about 80 to 90 million.
80 to 90. So it's, I suppose nearly double. But from a sort of, in terms of what they've seen on the sponsorship side of things and stuff like that, it feels like they weren't in a position where they necessarily had to go down that sort of like revenue first route. Particularly, that's kind of another thing that I'd sort of say on it. But now that it has happened, it'll be interesting to see what Apple does, because Eddie Q has come out and said since that, or around the time the deal was announced, he was saying the sports viewing has gone backwards, and I think their plans for production around it are still to be announced. So when those do come out, it'll be interesting to see sort of like what an Apple F1 broadcast looks like, I think. I
mean, what I would say is, if you are a Formula One fan that's been introduced via something like Drive to Survive, and I know there are races on ABC, but most of them are on ESPN, which until a couple of months ago required a cable subscription. An Apple TV subscription is going to be less than subscribing to ESPN's D2C product. It's going to be less than a cable subscription, quite substantially cheaper. So there is a chance that could be a positive move. I think the biggest thing is going off ESPN means you lose visibility over things like SportsCenter and other programming, and we've seen other sports suffer from that. Things like the NHL for almost not quite 2 decades, it was substantially underrepresented on SportsCenter and the programmers. You could argue, does that matter as much in the streaming age? But I think it is a factor. But that revenue jump is huge, and I think I know you might dispute me saying it's a plateauing sport, but it just shows how well F1 has done to have almost an outsized degree of influence on the market, given its audience, which again I think comes back to the fact it's quite a desirable fan base.
Yeah, I think you're totally right, and I think it's Apple. I believe the deal took a while to close because Apple was so concerned about the existence of F1 TV, and they wanted to spend this money on F1, but they didn't want to spend $150 million a year if F1 TV continued to exist as another product in the US. So I think from a revenue point of view, that's why Apple eventually decided to go with it once the F1 TV problem was fixed, I guess, in the US. Not that it was a problem, but yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see how it develops moving forward. I believe there's going to be some races available free to air through this deal. So I think seeing how the viewership is for those races might be an indication of how this could grow moving forwards. But I think we will probably see a step back.
Well, we look forward to seeing you badgering Formula One and Apple for viewership numbers next year, and that could be a bit of a thankless task considering how coy Apple have been with the MLS numbers, but we'll see. Before we go, we want to remind you that we're now only a week away from the SportsPro Media Summit, which will be taking place in Madrid from the 18th to the 19th of November. Do get your passes if you haven't already, because this is what you've got to look forward to.
Sports media is evolving, and so are we. In 2025, streaming is just one part of the story. The SportsPro Media Summit will unite the whole ecosystem under one roof to explore the latest trends and challenges in sports media. Experience world-class speakers and content, meaningful networking, and endless opportunities, from deep dive workshops to our coveted media awards ceremony, and so much more. Explore the hottest topics, from streaming and OTT through to monetization and social media. Built on over a decade of industry-defining insights, this has become the go-to platform for shaping what's next in sports media. From streaming to strategy, the full landscape redefined. This is the SportsPro Media Summit. Find out more by going to media.sportspro.com.
Sam, Steve, you'll both be in Madrid, won't you?
Yes, so I'm told anyway. I've got a flight booked, I think, so we'll be there.
I'll be there with bells on.
Good stuff. Well, do say hello if you are attending. That'll do for today, I think. Thanks for tuning in. We hope to have you again. Leave us a nice review if you're feeling generous. If you want to get in touch, you can email us at editor@sportspromedia.com, and make sure to check out our other podcasts as well. They are Stream Time, New Era, and Mike's Out. But for now, thank you, Cian, for your completely surprise visit.
Extremely surprised, and I think great improv from all involved. Good to be back.
Thank you, Josh.
Cheers, Ed.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Ed.
And thank you, Sam.
Thanks, Ed.
The SportsPro Podcast is produced by Dano Ling. Our executive producer is Manny Gill. This episode was recorded at SportsPro Towers in London.